The study is tackling the question of how should we best combat climate change. Most of the carbon emissions comes from fossil fuel combustion, but about 10% comes from deforestation, and most of that's happening in poor countries. It just turns out to seem at least like it's an inexpensive way to solve it. So it's costly for people to refrain from deforestation. They're losing out on income from selling timber, but that income loss is low in global terms. So we get the same environmental benefit no matter where in the world we reduce carbon emissions, and so trying to reduce deforestation in poor countries seems like a good strategy. One of the popular policies is called payments for ecosystems services. So the payment for an ecosystem service means paying people to do something that's good for the environment. In our case, it's an area of Uganda where families own forest, and they were given rewards, financial rewards, if they conserved it. Despite PES seeming like it's the way to go, we still want evidence on whether it actually works in practice. And there are a couple reasons to be worried that maybe the promise doesn't pan out in practice. One is what the experts call additionality, which is the idea that when you pay people to conserve, some of those people would have conserved anyway, and so not all of your payments are actually getting people to change their behavior. And another challenge is what's called leakage, which is the idea that if you pay people to preserve this forest, they'll do it, but maybe all those benefits get undone by people shifting their deforestation elsewhere. And so, it's really a question where you need data and see what happens in practice. We're the first study that applies this method of field experiments or randomized control trials to this question of PES and sort of more broadly to conservation programs at the scale of a landscape. This is a collaboration with a conservation nonprofit in Uganda. So they were the organization that was actually running the program and working with the forest owners and paying them. And we as researchers were evaluating how well does this actually affect forest cover. We designed this randomized trial where we chose 121 villages in this area, and then we randomly choose which ones will get the program. So 60 of the villages received the program, and the NGO, the nonprofit, worked in those villages, and then the rest were a comparison group. It was sort of business as usual. How much are people deforesting? One is we went and we surveyed people at the beginning and the end of the study to see how do they, according to them, how did they change their behavior, how did their lives change because of getting the program. And the other way we measure the outcome, which is really our main one, is through satellite imagery. So we use very high resolution satellite imagery where each pixel is 2.4 meters by 2.4 meters. So if I showed you the picture of it, you could actually see with your eye every single tree. We can quantify before it started to when it was in place in these villages that got the program compared to the comparison group, how much extra forest cover is in place because of the program. And we find the program had big effects. In the comparison villages without the program, business as usual, between the beginning and the end of the study, 9% of the tree cover that was in place at the beginning was gone by the end. So that's a pretty high rate of deforestation and thinning of the forest. In the villages with the program, there was just 4 to 5% tree loss. So there was still deforestation, but just much less of it. So you conserved a lot of forest because of the program. A lot of the concerns about these loopholes of people shifting their deforestation, or most people who sign up would have conserved anyway, they didn't pan out in practice. And one of the striking things we could see is really put these in dollar and cents terms. Over the course of those 2 years, you get a big gain in forest cover for each forest owner. And so when we think about that in terms of tons of carbon dioxide, each forest owner who enrolled was delaying about 450 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. And so when we put a dollar value on that and say, how valuable is that? It's worth about $500 to society. So we were working over about 1,000 square kilometers in a forest corridor in western Uganda. But this is an idea that could be scaled up to much larger areas of land. what our hope is that our study is a demonstration project that randomized control trials for conservation programs are feasible and can come up with quite informative answers. I think our evidence should make policymakers more enthusiastic about putting it in the portfolio of policies we use to combat climate change.